Relic Hunters Legend certainly has an adorable art style combined with the ability to play with up to 3 friends online, but is it a lootin' shootin' good time, or does this early access release backfire? Let's find out in our full early access review. Hey partner, you know what else is a rootin' tootin' good time? Heading on over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames to support clickbait-free independent content. You'll gain Discord access, catch exclusive live streams, and get early ad-free versions of shows. Your community is waiting. Relic Hunters Legend may look all cute and accessible on the outside, but on the inside lies a fairly complex shooter with quite the variety of systems and mechanics. This is further highlighted by the fact that the game begins with an hour-long tutorial, which might sound a bit off-putting, but also seems necessary. The game begins by interrogating the player's psyche a bit, asking questions ranging from your gender to your personality. This will award you with something akin to a tarot card, making this come off as something like a personality litmus test. I'm not entirely sure how this affects the gameplay, but I can say both myself and my co-op partner did ultimately receive different signs. From here, we wake up in a classroom and take control of a person referred to as Seven. We don't know their real name as they appear to be suffering from amnesia, and then we spend the next 40 plus minutes trying to learn all of the intricacies of the game's systems. There is a surprising amount of story in Relic Hunters Legend. Long story short, you join a band of rebels known as the Relic Hunters who are attempting to restore time itself, which was somehow stolen by the game's villain, Duke Dukan. The Hunters search for, well, relics obviously of the past to restore the memory of what has truly come to pass. The story is somewhat entertaining with some great cutscenes littered throughout and shockingly good voice performances, though the game is not fully voiced. Many times this felt like watching an old school Cartoon Network show. This is not a deep plot, but the characters are charming enough and it sets the game up well for multiple adventures. Unfortunately, the story-based levels cannot be played in co-op, which is not only a mistake in my opinion, but a bit annoying. The game goes so far as to announce that you've unlocked co-op after the extensive tutorial, only to reveal shortly after that story segments can't be played together. It's just a bit of a bummer. To explain every little element of Relic Hunters Legends gameplay would take an eternity, so I'll try to keep this as clean as possible. Even though there is a massive tutorial, things can get convoluted and confusing in a hurry. You start out with a memory system. Memories are consumed and allow you to gain XP. It's a bit of a mess as you then have to go to an inventory screen somewhat hidden in the UI, and that's just one factor. You'll also have relics to craft, weapons and equipment to upgrade, and don't even get me started on the recycle system. Then there are feats accomplished the more you play. This is an entirely different menu and must be cashed in for each character individually to increase your level, which allows you to wear better equipment and such. We aren't done yet, we also have skill points to contend with. These attribute and skill points are dispersed across characters to unlock new attacks and abilities in combat. In my opinion, there's just way too many systems to keep track of, and it gets a little bit frustrating, especially when you have to do this for every individual character. If you're someone who enjoys digging through menus, you might not be as bothered as I was, but I do feel like the overall UI can be improved. Hey, it is early access after all, so I get it. Outside of that, you can track quests, which works relatively fine, and then off you go to various areas scattered across the world, either solo or with friends. As I mentioned before, it takes a long time to even get to multiplayer, and the story mode sections didn't seem to allow for it at all, so this meant that me and Silent Signs were relegated to selecting specific level types to tackle together. These range from open exploration to surviving waves of enemies. The game is so much more fun with friends, so it's definitely a shame that things still feel a little bit limited in that department. The core combat in Relic Hunters Legend is honestly not half bad. You can select 2 different styles, whether you want to make this a twin-stick shooter or not, and have your abilities easily accessible with the bumpers should you be playing on a controller. Aiming, healing, and shooting all felt reasonably comfortable, and as you probably figured out, you'll have no shortage of loot to collect and equip. Relic Hunters Legend will be a grind, and even in early access, I found no shortage of things to do. All told, despite the ridiculous amount of systems and limits to story mode, Relic Hunters Legend does offer some undeniable fun in the gameplay department. It's interesting that the combat is relatively straightforward and was my favorite aspect of the game, while the menus and leveling systems are so messy for no real reason. Even bouncing through different levels via the game's world hub led to tons of locked off areas and confusion, though I imagine much of this has to do with the game again being in early access. Visually, I already talked about how Relic Hunters Legend reminded me a bit of a Cartoon Network show. It's really quite bright, has a charming style to it, and ran really well. This build of the game was currently optimized for 60 FPS, though it does seem the developers are working on higher frame rate options as well. 120 was available, but did seem a little bit unstable currently. There is decent variety to locations, though you will see some of the same assets time and time again, but overall, I like the style and presentation of this one, and for the sound, the voice acting, like I touched on, is quite impressive, adding a lot of fun and personality to the experience. The soundtrack itself is also pretty well done, with plenty of electronic synths, but the sound effects stand out even stronger, so all told, Relic Hunters Legend delivers in the visual and audio department. So while the systems are a bit confusing and perhaps more complicated than they needed to be, Relic Hunters Legend is currently on a good path, especially for an early access release. I look forward to revisiting the final release in a full review, but as to whether you should jump in early, I don't see why not if you are a fan of the genre. You certainly won't feel all that shortchanged in terms of content, but might need to contend with some of the usual growing pains that come with early access games. I was impressed with this title and will certainly be keeping my eye on it going forward.